Good evening. Welcome to Kingdom Come with evangelist and pastor of Messiah Ministries International, Pastor Fergus. He's an ordained pastor, mission evangelist, and founder of MOI London. And he's anointed to pray for healing for the sick for over 20 to 30 years. Is that right, Pastor
That's
Fergus?
about right, Jess.
So Fergus has travelled extensively throughout Africa, deep in the bush and beyond, often risking his very life to reach the unreached and share the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. During these sessions, he'll be sharing teachings, testimonies, answering questions, and inviting people to call in who need prayer for healing from our Lord Jesus Christ. But first, he'll be sharing his own personal testimony of how he came to truly know and follow the Lord in the midst of the greatest tragedy a parent could face, losing his young son, Alistair, in a tragic accident and being healed of stage 4 terminal cancer. It is such an honour and a privilege to sit here with you today, Pastor Fergus. Would you first share with us really who you are and what Messiah Ministries is all about?
Thank you, Jess. It's lovely to be here with you all and to be on Gospel for Grampian. Well, we're a ministry that's basically a missionary ministry. We're an outgoing ministry. We have a church in London, which is wonderful, but also it's discipleship making, which is a wonderful thing to have. We come from Central Africa, in the Zimbabwe, Zambian regions. That's where our family was born and brought up, and so we basically African people. But Messiah Ministries takes the gospel to places where a lot of people don't want to go. At the moment with the lockdown, we can't move, but we are moving in London. And when this lockdown is released, we go straight back into the mission field. Taking the gospel of Jesus Christ to the lost and the needy, and right through Africa, Jess. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We're making disciples. We have a very powerful ministry anointing of healing, and we've seen wonderful things happen in our time.
Amazing, yeah. And so you were a pro golfer, weren't you? Do you want to? What happened there? Do you want to tell us a bit about like your golfing life?
Yeah, thank you, Jess. Yes. Well, when I was a young boy actually, I was a pretty good sportsman in my time, and I was led to go into pro golf. And my dad was he's a Highlander. The Buchans come from Buchan, which is northeast of Scotland, and Dad left there many years ago because he couldn't take the cold weather. I don't blame him. Anyway, he arrived in Africa in the 20s, and we were, as I said earlier, were born and brought up in Central Africa. Because of my sporting abilities, I started playing golf. First of all, caddying for him, and then starting to play golf. And then I got better and better and better. And the old pro, he was known as Uncle Crawford McCluskey. He was a very, very good Irish professional. And he saw some talent in me, and he went to Dad and said, "Listen, I think Fergus should think about, playing some golf as a golf professional." And when my dad, Jess, he turned around to me in front of Uncle Crawford, what I would call him, and he said, "Laddie," he says, "golf is for people to play on weekends. It's not a job." Anyway, that's what he said to me, because he was an engineer, and he wanted me to be an engineer, but it didn't turn out that way. And I became a pro golfer.
Okay. And how did you enjoy that life? What happened? What were the experience you had in that crazy sort of lifestyle?
Well, to kick off with, I had to get a position as an assistant pro. And in the early days, it's not like it is nowadays. Things have changed. And I had to get a position. And eventually, I found a position in what was then Rhodesia, at Royal Salisbury Golf Club. And I was the assistant there to a pro called Dick Morley. And from the day one, Jess, we never really hit it off. He wasn't my favorite cup of tea, that guy. But anyway, I stuck it out for a year, and I got better and better. But it taught me a lot of humility there. Because it was Royal Salisbury, when our club carries the title of Royal, it means a royal member's played there. Okay, that's the history of it. And because I was an assistant golf professional and not a member of the club, I wasn't allowed in the club. So I had to have my meals in the pro shop and basically use the facilities for the caddies, what they used, because I wasn't allowed anywhere near that club. Yeah. So that is my affiliation started with caddies. I have a genuine love for caddies.
Yeah.
they're all a bunch of they're not the most honest guys in the world, and they but you know what? Neither was I. But I spent a lot of time with caddies and grew up with them and with African folk. And I think later on, as we go into this podcast, you will see where my love for Africans comes. It was quite a long journey though, because as we will share later, I wasn't always a lover of those guys. But anyway, it happened. And then from there, I went back to Zambia, worked for a very, very lovely man called Jackie Muir. He was the pro at Nkana Golf Club, and he got me a position at Nchanga Golf Club. Now, these are names that some people will remember, most of you won't. Nchanga Golf Club was a very, very well-known golf course. Bobby Locke actually played there once, and it was a great time of my life. I was there for 7 years. And then after that, things started to change.
Yeah, and how did things change? You know, did you get involved like in like, you know, a bit of debauchery and who did you mix with?
Well, you know, pro golfers, well, not all of them, but I was one of them. I was a party animal and loved, you know, the parties and everything that went with it. But what actually happened there, Jess, which did have a big turning point in my life, was UDI came to Rhodesia, and the borders were closed, and we were locked in Zambia. And then President Kenneth Kaunda forbade any of us to come and play in South Africa or in Rhodesia, and we were locked in. Because if you did, I'll share a short, quite a exciting story. What happened to one of my best friends? We had to stay there. We couldn't survive. So what we did was, my passport was still, when it was issued, still had scholar. So I was officially a schoolboy. So what I did was I went down to South Africa to play on the SA tour, and a very good friend of mine, Simon Hobday, did the same. Simon was older than me and a very, very good golfer. And we came back, and we slipped through the old, we got back into the country. Nobody knew, but the word got out. And I was playing in the Mufulira Open, which is on the Copperbelt. And I think I was on the 3rd or the 4th hole, and Simon was around the 9th or the 10th. I don't know where he was. But hearing through the middle of the golf course was about 5 police vans and paratroopers, and I thought, what the heck's going on here? And the next thing, they got hold of Simon Hobday, put him in handcuffs, and took him off the golf course. And I can laugh about it now, but the funny thing was they put his poor caddy in handcuffs and put him in the back of the van as well. The guy said, I'm a Zambian, I've done nothing wrong. Anyway, they took him off, and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to be next. Yeah. And I wasn't next, because I got through the cauldron. I slipped through. But Simon was given 24 hours to leave the country. And Jenny and his 4 girls, I said goodbye to them at Lusaka with Jackie Muir. Well, they actually did Simon a favor in a way, because he became a very, very famous golfer after that. He won in the States, he won in South Africa, he won in Europe, he won everywhere. And but about a year later, they caught up with me, and we had some real drastic times because of the war. And they basically closed us down and froze all our bank accounts. And I had to leave Zambia. I had enough money to buy an air ticket, my golf bag, and 1 suitcase, and I flew to South Africa. And I started off. When I landed, it's now Oliver Tambo, but I landed in the airport. It's called Jan Smuts. I had 10 rand in my pocket. Everything I had up there, I had some fancy cars, I had a big pro shop, I had a lot of money. It was frozen. And that's, which will come later. I kind of arrived, Jess, in South Africa with a very black heart. Yeah. I actually was a guy that didn't, I was a bit of a bitter kind of a man then. Yeah.
I'm sure I can imagine that does that to you. And we all know that, in the golfing world, that after you've been on the golf course, you go back with all the guys, and you go and have some drinks, and how was that? How was that being involved, in such a different lifestyle to that you're in now, where it's very revolved around drinking and partying, and I'm guessing playing such high up with such high up people and celebrities, I guess. Even how was that?
Well, Jess, you're right. I was a single guy for most of that time. I hadn't met Joanne yet. That's my wife, and I'll share a little story about her later. But yeah, we were into parties. We we would sometimes walk out of the party onto the first tee and continue playing the round of golf. We just didn't go home. But that wasn't conducive to good golf, that I can tell you. I wouldn't recommend that to any young pro now. But yeah, we got up to hijinks and a lot of gambling. I was a pretty well-known gambler on the golf course and in the casinos. And thank goodness, that must be my Scottish blood, Jess. I normally won. But yes, and we rubbed shoulders with a lot of guys, and two men. One man, if I can share with you, changed my life actually. Even in those early days when the Lord was, I think He had His hand on me from the beginning. Obviously, I was a rebellious prodigal son, but I had the privilege of playing with Sir Humphrey Gibbs, and he was the last Governor General of Rhodesia, and They said to me, Fergus, we want you to play with Sir Humphrey every Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. You'll come down. And I said, oh, I'd be honored to play. And they said, well, we don't know about that because I said, well, why are you asking me? They said, because he's the worst golfer in the world and you'll be looking for his golf ball in the bush all the time. But anyway, it was quite true. I had thorns and things in my hair looking for his golf balls. But Jesse was an absolute gentleman. Yeah, when UDI was in its force, and Mr. Smith I met 3 times, the Prime Minister of Rhodesia. He was called back to the UK, and he said, "No, I've got work to do here." And the then government said, "Well, we'll take away your governorship, and you have to leave Government House and all." He said, "Take it all away," and Sir Humphrey stayed. And the thing with that gentleman, he taught me what a gentleman is. Yeah. He had a shock of white hair. Handsome man. He was in his late 60s, maybe 70 when I met him. And after the 9 holes, we could only manage 9 holes. He couldn't play further than that. We'd go into what is called the halfway house. Yeah. It's like a little tea room. Yeah. And he would sit down with me and he would say, "Fergus," I said, "Yes, Sir Humphrey." He says, "Do you like chocolate cake?" Oh, what a question to a young man who's 16 years old. And he says, "Do you like cream?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, we'll have cream and chocolate cake, shall we?" I said, "I've never eaten cream with it, sir, but I'll do it if you do it." Anyway, we got stuck into that cake, and he never missed. He'd say to me, "Do you got room for one more piece?" Well, I'll tell you what. And then I'd carry his golf clubs back to the car with the pendants, and the chauffeur would open the doors, He was a Governor General. Yeah. Commissioner, whatever, I don't know what he was, but anyway. And then he would reach into his pocket and give me 2 shillings and 6pence as a gift. Now that 2 shillings and 6pence was a lot of money then. Yeah, I was charging for a lesson, 1 shilling and 6pence, and I had to give a bob, the shilling, to my boss. So I got a 6pence out of that. So 2 and 6 was a lot of money to me. And he'd say to me, "Same time next week." I said, "I'll be here, Sir Humphrey," and especially for the chocolate cake. Anyway, that was one of the men that really had an impact on me. Another guy I'd like to share with you. There's many names I'm not dropping names. I don't want to share with you. I was playing in the Kenyan Open. Early 70s, and because of my Scottish heritage, the CEO of British BP, British Petroleum, had a party for all the guests of honor, and not that I was a guest of honor, but because I was Scottish, he wanted all the Scottish pros to come, because he had a special guest who played in the Pro-Am, and he was none other than Mr. James Bond, Sean Connery, 007. Wow. Yep. So we all had to get dressed up and dolled up, and we all got in there. And this CEO was quite a character. Around that part of Muthaiga, which is a part of Nairobi, all the embassies were plenty. So he rounded up all the embassy guys and all their daughters, and each pro that came had a chaperone. Okay, like these 2 lovely girls, by the way, that are interviewing me, folks. So I got a young girl from, I think, Finland. Right, off we go. The bee's knees, just the golf pro. And anyway, the party carried on. And then everybody stopped because the guy had a big, like a announcement stick, or whatever you call those things. Boom, boom, boom. The guest of honor has arrived. And in walks Sean Connery. Now, this is in the 70s. He was a handsome guy, man. Yeah, he was. Well, I can tell you guys, I never saw my chaperone again, and neither did anybody else, because whenever Sean Connery walked, they were behind him. And I had a minute with him, I must say, Jess. Yes, I did. And he said to me, how did you play, Fergus? And I said, yeah, I'm not too bad. I said, how did you play? He says, listen, my name is Connery, but my first name is Thomas. He says, call me Tam, because he was a Glasgow man, came from Glasgow. And I said, well, thank you very much. He said, no, I mean it. So I said, okay, Tam, how did you play? So I had maybe 5 minutes with the famous Sean Connery. He was still there in the current Mr. Bond.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And people don't know this. He was a Mr. Scotland, because he had a nice body, a nice build, and he was a bouncer in Glasgow. So he's not a guy to play with.
I don't know.
No, toughie. This was a toughie, and he loved his golf. Sean Connery is now, I think he's 98. Yeah. So that's, I mean, I'm going to mention I'm not going to mention names. I'm not dropping names, but that was for me very exciting, and I never saw Miss Finland again. So anyway, so that's just some of the things we used to get up to.
I mean, wow, you really had everything, didn't you? Money, celebrity, things that the majority of us crave. But now, in the midst of all of this, you had one of the most precious gifts taken away from you, your son Ali. Can you share with us what happened to Ali?
Yes, I can. But I want to just backtrack a bit if I can. When I landed in South Africa now, and I kind of put my roots down there, I didn't want to come back to Europe. I don't like the cold weather. And so I was there for, I don't know, maybe 8 months, starting again with nothing. And one of my best friends came into the pro shop one day and he said, Fergus, we've been invited to some kind of a ball. And I've got a good friend that she needs a partner. So I said, yeah, okay. I was single. And I said, yeah, no problem. He said, so will you come with us, with his girlfriend and this young lady? I said, yeah, I'll come. Anyway, that young lady, I was playing on the golf course and she came down to meet me. So I come up the pro shop and I walk in and I put my clubs down, and there was this very, very beautiful young woman sitting having a steak sandwich and a cup of tea. So I said, hi, hello. She says, hello. So I went in and changed my shoes and I said to you can't see my hands now, but I said to my assistant, who's this? Who's this? And I said, no, she's waiting for you. So I went back. I said, oh, have you come for a golf lesson? Or no, I'm Joanne, Chippy's friend. Anyway, we went to the ball. And whatever it was, I forget. It was a function. And we had a great time, and then we started going out together. But before I get into the deeper stuff, I'll give you an idea of what kind of guy I was. So nobody can pull their punches, warts and all. And there was a place called the Carlton Centre. It's in the middle of Johannesburg. It's a 5-star hotel. And downstairs every Friday night was like a happy hour, and peanuts and everything like that. And it was a multiracial pub, right? Now, bear in mind, I was one of the biggest racists that ever came down because I lost everything. Eventually came back to me later, but anyway, I really battled. Yeah. So anyway, the whole bunch of us are down there, all the girlfriends, Joanne included, came back from work and we'd meet there. So there's a party of about 10 or 14 of us or 12 of us, and we're all having a good time and we're getting ready to go out and have dinner. And I was just going to lift my beer. I was drinking in those days, and often too much. Anyway, I was going to have a sip of my beer, and a chap came up from behind me and bumped me quite hard, actually. And the beer missed my mouth and went all over my jackets and my trousers, and it was a black guy. Now, it wasn't because he was a black guy that I punched him. Yeah. Okay, girls. It was because I was that kind of guy. We didn't talk too much. If you got on the wrong side of me or the other brother, the one we'll talk about later, that's Angus. Well, we weren't the nicest guys in the world. We were nice guys, but we were rough guys. Yeah. Anyway, we had one almighty fight because this guy had friends as well. So all the ladies stood back, and then the men were getting stuck in there. And the next thing, somebody shouted, the police are coming with sirens. And those police didn't play games in South Africa. Yeah. So because whatever we were, we slipped out the back door and ran away. Put the girls in a taxi, and we shot down Bree Street or whatever. I don't know. Well, the next morning, I got a phone call, and it was Joanne. I said, oh, hi, Joe. She says, hello. I said, how's it going? No, fine. She says, I'm just phoning to tell you I never want to see you again. I said, well, why? This is the rough and tough from the north of Africa. She said, well, I've never known anybody to behave like you do. So I said, what do you mean? He says, you hit that man in the face. I said, yeah, and more. I was laughing. She said, I don't think it's funny. She said, I don't want to be associated with people like you. So I said, oh, come on, Joe. She says, cheerio, put the phone down. Now, I knew then that this woman was for me, and this girl was for me. And I had to eat a lot of humble pie, Jess. So, yeah, shape up or ship out, eh? And she doesn't play games, even to this day. After 42 years of marriage, she's only about 3 foot high, but I don't play games with her. Anyway, I went and bought every rose that was in Johannesburg and all the chocolates in the world, and I went around to the house and I ate a lot of humble pie. She stayed with her mom and dad, and we got back together. Yeah, and then from there, we obviously courted, and then we got married, and we stayed in Johannesburg and Hillbrow, which is the real center of Joburg, not a real hippie place. You know, it's a real bohemian area. It was really, really nice because I was at a golf club just down the road. And we started our family. So that's how we kicked off. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, honestly, what a life. What a life. But yeah, so how do you feel about, you know, discussing and sharing what happened with Ali? Are you fine with that?
Yeah, I'm up to that. Well, folks, this is my testimony. This is actually what I shared with you before was the rugby and the cricket, and we were all. My brother played international rugby, and I played cricket for Zambian schools. I got international cap. We were all sportsmen, rough and ready guys. So that's history. But now Joanne and I are married, and my first son comes along, Fergus Buchan. He's a pastor now in Boston. Really wonderful. Then my 2 girls came along. Twins, Sheena and Kirsty, and then my baby came, my last baby, all babies, Alistair, and you know, things were. I wasn't a Christian. Joanne was always a Christian. Yeah. Okay, that's how God works, and things couldn't have been better for me because I'd bounced back. I was always a guy that could make a plan. I was a good golfer. I was a good businessman, and all of a sudden, I've got this beautiful wife, 4 beautiful kids, and things couldn't be better. The new cars came around again. I bought Jo her first new car, and the clubhouse got too small where we lived on the property, and I made enough money. I bought a house in a very nice part of Springs, where I lived, Springs Country Club. And wow, man, we were cracking it. Really, I was doing well on the tour, and I was doing well in the pro shop, and we had sports shops. And we were doing very, very well and in the world. But then in 1988, the 6th of April at 12:30, I will never forget the day, the time, or the place. My life changed. My life changed, Jess, and folks out there. And what we would do, I will just share a little bit on it, and then we can go in deeper a bit later. Every Easter, our family, the Buchan family from Joburg, would go down to KwaZulu-Natal, which was then known as Natal. I have a brother, Angus, and I also have a sister, Morag, all Scottish names. And Angus was a farmer in Greytown in KwaZulu-Natal, and we'd go down every Easter. My 4 kids, he had 5 kids, and we'd have a special Easter weekend together. He became a Christian, but had just become a Christian. I was still in the world. And I never blasphemed, by the way, or funny, I never mocked Christian people. Yeah. I'd mock a lot of other guys and women, but I'd never mock Christians, but I didn't want anything to do with you either. You do what you got to do, and I'll do what I got to do. Yeah. And I was the kind of guy, and many of you men are listening to this, and catch a wake up, you guys, listen to this. It was okay for me to let Joe and the kids go to church, but not me. I always made sure I was too busy practicing or working or a cop-out. Actually, a cop-out. Yeah. Right. So we go down, and on that fateful day, in the death of my son, but an eventful day for the rest of my life. Yeah. And we were all outside playing cricket because, as I said to you earlier, brothers and sisters, we were sportsmen, really high quality sportsmen. And we all loved cricket. And Ali was running around like a mad thing. He was 4 years old. And he came running up to me, and he had 2 favorite things in his life. He loved tractors, and he'd always be sitting on my brother's tractors in his sheds, driving the tractor like the little boys do. I couldn't find him. I knew where to look. And the other thing, he loved his uncle, and he had a bit of a lisp, Alistair, and he couldn't get Uncle Angus out. He used to call him Auntie Angus. And of course, we never changed that, but Angus loved that. I mean, he's a big, rough, tough rugby player. He's Auntie Angus. Anyway, he came running down and he said, Daddy, can I go for a drive with Uncle Angus on the tractor? His two favorite things in life. And thank the Lord then, I said, yes, I'm fine, but just go and ask if it's okay with Mom. And he ran up to his mother, and he loved his mother. Oh, he was jealous of Joanne. Woo. He was a jealous little boy. And Joe said, yeah, go. Anyway, we carried on playing, and about 10 minutes later, Angus's boss boy came running down the fields. And he said, boss means sir in Zulu. Bwana. Uncle, Boss Angus said, you must get to the hospital as quick as possible. And I said to him, why? What's happened? He says, there's been an accident. I said, what happened? He says, the little boy. And I thought, oh, dear God. I said, right, so Joe got up and she went white as a sheet instantly. Mothers know. Yeah. Mothers know. Yeah. So we got into the car and we were rushing through, and Joe says, there's big trouble, Fergus. You see, Joe's very spiritual, very, even to this day. I said, no, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. I'm not a Christian now, don't forget that. Yeah. And, but I had a foreboding, and we drove into Greytown. It's a small little town, beautiful little town, nestled in the mountains, and drove up to the hospital, and we just parked right in front of the stairs, and I can see those white stairs now. And those of you that have seen Faith Like Potatoes, it's a very famous movie, exactly what I'm discussing, but you're getting it from me now. And Jess, Joe and I ran up the stairs, and as I got to the top of the stairs, Angus was standing there, and his shirt was just covered in blood. And I looked at this, and I thought, this is serious. And he lifted his arms, and he said, Fergie, Ali's gone. And I stopped in my tracks, and Joanne stopped. She just looked at me, and we walked into the passageway. Angus came in behind me, and the doctor was there, and he said, I'm sorry, your little boy has died. And you can imagine. You can just imagine. Joe sat down. She had to sit down. She sat down in a chair. And we just stood around. I mean, 15 minutes earlier, we were playing cricket. Yeah. Running around, having fun. And he's gone. And the doctor said, would you like to see your son? I said, yeah. I said, I do. Joe didn't. And I'm pleased she didn't. Yeah. So I went into the operating theatre. There he was, on the table. And brothers and sisters, something you must understand about eternal issues. I could have had Dr. Christian Barnard standing next to me, the first heart transplant specialist in the world. I could have had the greatest oncologists. I could have had the greatest professors, and they couldn't bring him back. I was the man that made plans. I was buy here, sell there, double the bets. I always came out with a lot of money, and I couldn't do a thing. Because he was lying on the table, and I was standing next to him. Not in good shape either. He went under the back of a tractor wheel. 4 years old. And yes, Jess, and brothers and sisters that are listening to this testimony, this is the bad part, by the way. This is the hard part. The good part's coming. And I put my hands through his blonde hair. He had beautiful curly hair, actually. And I said goodbye to him. And I walked out of that operating theatre to face Joanne and Angus in the hallway. And that drive home in that car, because he wanted to sit with us, and he sat between the two seats at the back and he had his arms around Joe and me. And we got home. And and I think, Jess, if it's okay with you and you listeners out there, I'd like to bring the second part next week to you. And I'd like to leave it as where we are. Because you know what I always do say, and listen to this man that's walked through the valleys, real valleys. Real valleys, Jess. That when eternal issues come to your doorstep, that's when you really know who God is. You know, you can feel sorry for me, and I can feel sorry for you, and my mom's got cancer, but when it comes to your doorstep, that's when you have to make decisions. That's when you realize who God is. And what I'll do next week with you beloved folk, is I will share with you how God got me out of the deepest, blackest hole I've ever been in my life. And I'll share with you there how we went from that stage. We got to the farm. All the staff came out. My brother had a big staff. His wife, Jill, was there with her 5 children and my 3 children. One didn't come home. And it's a day we'll never forget in the Buchan family, because Jill Buchan is Angus's wife. That's her name. It was her birthday that day. Can you imagine? And we just went inside and put the kettle on and sat down around the table. The kids were crying. My eldest daughter, I say eldest daughter, she's 2 minutes older than the other one. They're twins. She was on the tractor with Angus and Alistair. She was on the other side, and she saw it. She saw everything. And it had a deep effect on her life later on in her life with some issues. Yeah, which we're going to go into and talk about and share with you just how graceful and loving Jesus Christ is. Okay, so that's where we're at, Jess.
And what I'm sure many listeners will want to know, what about your relationship with your brother after? Can you describe what that relationship looked like in the days and weeks, even years after losing Ali? Did you wrestle with anger together towards him, hatred?
No, Jess. I think God had his hand on both of us. You see, Angus is only 2 years older than me, so we were like twins. We went through everything together. So it wasn't like he was 10 years older or younger. And I never had it was an accident. The most precious gift of my life then, the 4 children, one was taken away. But I never had any bitterness or anger. And one thing I'll always be so grateful to my wife. There's many things I'm grateful to Joanne for, but one thing, she's never blamed my brother. You know, that could have destroyed our family. Yeah. It could have broken our family to pieces. And Angus was in shock, obviously. I mean, he was in total shock, and it took him a long time for him to come out of this tragic accident that happened. And you know, by the grace of God, I think in a way we came closer because of this. There was never, people asked, how did your brother behave? How did he was heartbroken. And that's another thing which I'm going to share with you in our next interview about the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, because you just heard I touched on our background, that we were a pair of tough guys. And we really were tough. I'm not bragging about it because I don't want to give the devil anything else. But we cried. We never cried. You know the old days, Jess, stiff upper lip? Yeah. Cowboys don't cry in front of their horses. Yeah, that was us. But we cried and cried, him and I, in each other's arms. and it broke us. I think it started to take, well, it didn't start. It took every bit of pride away from me that you can imagine. It just showed me how vulnerable we are. Like I said, I always made a plan. Everything, we were in a bit of debt with this company. I would go and make a plan and win some money or play nicely or whatever and go and pay the debts off. But there's no plans now. This is finished. This is eternal issues, yes. So Angus and I walked together and encouraged one another. And to this day, on the 6th of April, my brother phones me. Yeah. He's one of the last guys. Yeah, I know people know my testimony, and this is the first part of my testimony. I'm not finished with the first part because we're going to go into the second part next week.
Yes.
And pick up where we are from. But as we left that farm, Angus came to me, and he was trying to get me to come to Christ. And I always say, no, thanks, Angus. It's okay for you. I'm all right. Leave me alone. But just to backtrack a little bit, Joanne went and lay down in a bedroom, and I couldn't sit. I couldn't stand. I couldn't sit. And I just walked out into those fields of Angus's, these mealie fields, maize fields. And there was a big storm brewing, a big storm coming over. And I fell on my knees in his plowed fields on my own. And the rain started, thunder came. And I wept and wept and wept and wept. And I gave my life to Jesus Christ. Yeah. And the rain came down. I was full of mud. And I stayed out there. I don't know how long I stayed out there. They came out looking for me. They didn't know where I was. And I didn't tell anybody then at that stage. But I really knew who God was that day. I had an encounter with God. And I came back in and had to have a shower and wash down. And we just sat around, and the party was cancelled. We had nothing. The next day I packed up. I was supposed to stay another couple of days, I think. We just went home. Yeah. But as I left, Angus said to me, Fergus, I can't give you anything. And I said, no, you can't. Because what I want, you can't give me. I wanted my son back. And he gave me his Bible. And he said, this, if you stick to this, Fergus, and read this, he says, I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to come out of this together. Meaning Joanne, Jill, his 5 kids, my 3 kids. And I had that Bible for years and years and years. And one of my best friends, he's an armor bearer in my ministry. He was on the men's prayer group this morning. He's got it now. So yeah, so that's where we went, Jess, from there. And then I will share with you what happened at another stage when we got home back to Johannesburg, because my life had changed now. Yeah, massively.
And how did your brother Angus, how did he experience his grief? How did he cope with what happened? Obviously, being the responsible adult, how did he deal with his grief? Do you know?
Well, fortunately, he was a Christian, so he had and Jill was a strong Christian. But funny, both our wives were Christian before we were, and I think Jill was a great comfort to him. But he had a great comfort of the Lord. A lot of his friends were Christian men, and they came around him, and they encouraged him. But he was also in a deep hole, Jesse. He would phone me almost every day, and we would just cry on the phone, and we encouraged one another in a way I didn't know how to then, because I didn't know Jesus, you see. I'd met him in the fields, but I didn't know him. Yeah. So he came out of this hole, and he was in depression. He was, he also just didn't want to farm anymore. He just didn't know what to do with himself. Yet he had 5 children. And a wife, and a farm that he had just started up after losing a lot of stuff in Zambia as well. And he was a very hard-working man, and he came out of it, was in church, and things were starting to work for him. And bang, this came. So he battled, yes. Yeah. He had a big battle, a very big battle.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And what happened next after you left? What did you have the funeral? how was at the funeral?
Yes, well, what we did was we had Alistair cremated, and then we had a service on the farm. And on Angus's farm, my dad built him a chapel. My dad and mom retired on his farm, and Dad built Angus a thatched chapel, which is still there to this day. And we had a meeting there, and a lot of people came from around who knew us, and obviously close family like Joanne's mum. Dad had passed away, came down, and my sister Moreg with her family came down, and the local pastor that Angus was worshipping at the church took the service for us. But you know, it's an amazing thing that I don't really know what the guy spoke about because I wasn't there. I was there physically, but I wasn't there. I wasn't emotionally, spiritually. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of my son, and so was Joe. And obviously, we wept a lot. Just everybody, just about, was in tears because we were a pretty well-known family. Not because we were famous or anything like that. It's the tragedy of what happened. And Jess, it was very difficult, very, very difficult. You know, people came up and consoled us and put their arms around us. But you know, how do you console somebody that's lost a child like that?
Yeah.
Or sorry, not like that, like losing a child. What do you say to somebody? And that's what I've learned with counseling, which I do now a lot, is you don't need scriptures. You don't need people to come and the last thing you want to say, it's going to be okay, because it's not going to be okay. It took a long, long time for me and Joanne to come out of this. It's a process.
Yeah.
Grieving. Yeah. The Bible says that. It's time to grieve. And then there's a time to rejoice and a time to laugh. And you know, that lovely song. So at that time, after people had left us, we had coffee and everything like that. And we just went back down to the house. We just put our arms around each other and walked home, because his chapel is only about half a kilometer from his house. And we went home and we had a small lunch. And the next morning, very early, Jess, I just looked at Angus, he looked at me, and we just said goodbye to each other. And not in goodbye like this is the end of our relationship. In fact, our relationship, I think, is strengthened then. You know, Angus and I are now preaching the gospel all over the world, as many people know about Angus Buchan and Fergus Buchan. He's got a different ministry to me, so that's what we're doing now, and so that's where we went from there, Jess. And then from there, I went home, and I had to start again. Yeah. Literally.
Well, yeah, wow. I mean, and after all of this, you know, you and your brother still ended up ministering together. It's beautiful. It's amazing. So obviously you touched briefly about, you know, your wife Joanne, and the kids, and she's actually coming to join us in 1 week and share her experience and testimony as a mother. But can you quickly tell us what your marriage looked like from your perspective after losing Ali?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, if you remembered, I did ask Alistair to speak to his mum as well. Not that Joe would have blamed me or why did you let him go, or blah, blah, blah. But you know, an amazing thing happened, Jess. Joanne was a Christian in the family, and I was the unbeliever. And she walked away from church. She said, I can't do this. Now, I'd just come to Jesus. And we had the most wonderful pastor. He was a Presbyterian pastor. I'll share a bit more about it. Chunky Young. Chunky's gone home to be with the Lord now, but he loved us. He was a sportsman, loved what I used to do, and Joe just said to me, if you want to go to church with the kids, go. I'm not coming. And I looked at her and I said, but well, you know, she says, no, I can't handle this. You see, that's the question everybody always asks. How can a God you love do a thing like this? Yeah. All right, that's the bottom line. Yeah. And I'll give you the answer later. And Chunky gave me good counsel. He said, just leave her. But you keep coming with the kids. So that's what happened with us. So one walked away from God, the other one walked to God. Yeah. Now remember what I said to you earlier? She was the Christian, yeah, and I was the unbeliever. Excuse me. And I carried on going to church for a long time with me and the kids in the mornings. And there's just a happy ending to this particular segment. Men can be a bit silly, stupid. Say it like it is, Fergus.
Yeah.
And I'm in the kitchen, I'll never forget this, and my two girls were always immaculately dressed. Joanne was really a good mum, and Fraser was well dressed and sort of. And I was just getting ready to get into the car, and Joe walked into the kitchen, dressed to the nines. And I looked at her and I said, stupidly, where are you going? Thinking she was going to have tea with her mum or lunch. And she just looked at me and she said, I'm coming to church today. Yeah. So as a family, we got into the car and we started the process. The long, long process. Nothing was healed. Nothing was. Joe and I had testing times where we couldn't look at each other but cry. Yeah. We never fought with each other, thank God, because we were too heartbroken. We had our hearts ripped out of our chests, ripped out, completely. And so we had to kind of get to know each other again. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it wasn't easy, but there's always a good side to a tragedy, and God always gets the glory out of a tragedy. Okay, so that's what we'll go into and work through. So brothers, be encouraged out there. I know other people have lost children. I counsel a lot of people that have lost children. I know all about, and loved ones. If you keep your eyes on Jesus, believe me, no matter what you're going through, this is probably the hardest thing, to lose a child like that. To lose a child. God will get you through it, because I'm living testimony. And it's such a privilege and honor to share with you people. And Jess, thank you for the interview. And we're going to be doing some more interviews together. And I really appreciate your hard-hitting questions. You didn't hold back, did you?
Definitely not. I'm definitely no holding back. But yeah, amazing. Thank you. This tragedy tore your family apart. Instantly, it all changed and affected your lives forever. But yeah, you got through it with the grace of God, which is amazing. But thank you so much for coming today and sharing what I can only imagine was one of the most difficult days of your life. Next week we will be asking some even tougher questions to really understand how you came to the Lord after losing your beloved Ali, and I guess speak a bit more on how it affected your children, maybe, and a bit more, about you and Joe. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. It was lovely.
Thank you, Jess, and God bless you all. We're really blessed to have this hour that Rob Rowe has given us to share with you folks, and I really look forward to doing some ministry as we walk this road together. So God bless you all. Till next time. God bless. Bye-bye.